Willow, Season 6, Chapter 11, Trojan Raccoon. Ever been out walking your dog and you stop to sit on a park bench? Then, as you're resting your legs, perhaps getting a sip of water and giving your pooch a treat, another dog owner sits next to you. You know them and they know you. Your animals may not be familiar to each other, but you know his dog and he knows yours. I've never owned a dog, but I've witnessed the scene repeated ad nauseum in movies and on television, in books, and even mentioned in song. Isn't it a tip given to single men to get a dog so they can meet new people? Terrible advice, if you ask me. It's a tired trope, to be sure, but a fascinating one nonetheless. The whole encounter, too often painted with hues of romance, has always held a hint of the surreal in my eye. It's like a demi-friendship, the almond milk of human connection, a fine substitute, sometimes even better than the original if the circumstances are right. On average, however, it can't really compare to the real deal. This is kind of what I have going on with Patience, the only denizen of Willow Border Park with whom I have more than a passing conversation. Our dogs are a macaron sprite and an envy demon, and our respective nature breaks far out of the tight confines of romantic comedies. Our meeting spot is no sunlit park with a bubbling fountain and the laughter of children to couch our conversation. Rather, it's a spider's nest of the bizarre, a place where those too strange, even by Willow standards, come to find solace or refuge. Patience isn't like the others, though. Not that he's any less strange. We're all unique to each other here. But he's the only one I've seen breaking through the bubble of loneliness we each enjoy. Special amongst the denizens of ABP, he isn't veiled in that dreamlike cloth that separates the fairy hunter from the tall man, or keeps me from taking a peek into the old woman's carriage. Patience talks to us. I haven't seen you in what, I wonder aloud. A month? More? Calm and pale, Patience lifts the plastic container in his lap so that it's level with his eyes. The milky sides are streaked with what looks like a vile syrup, effluvia purged from the creature held within. I'm sorry I haven't dropped by, he says, observing the slug in the container. But I have seen you a few times. Reading. I didn't want to bother you. Either imagined or muffled by the plastic walls of its cell, there's a sort of hissing coming from the slug. It'd be easy to assume the sound is one of anger, but I know it is something more perfidious. I thought you were supposed to destroy that thing, I say of the envy demon. That was one option, Patience says, his attention still on the slug. But you also mentioned I could keep it as a pet. As long as you kept it far from me and mine, which I have to point out, you're not doing right now. The creature slithering with languid undulations across the bottom of the plastic container is like a slow drip of terror. Every moment in its close proximity, one drop closer to a panic attack. Oh, how it cost me, that beast of envy. I had to watch as it tore itself out of Vicky Paramore's chest, bloody and poisoned. The only thing that kept her alive was a deal I'd made with the devil herself. That episode, never fully processed in my heart, replays in my mind's eye with every coiling of the slug's body. I know, Patience says, his tone even but repentant. I'd rather not, but it can't be helped. There's a lot going on right now, and I don't want to keep my eye off this thing for a moment. Burdens are heavy enough without a repeat of rampant envy sweeping through town. There's a soft skittering sound that spills from the birdcage at my side. The macaron sprite getting restless and hungry. I always feed it apple slices whenever we take these walks to Willow Border Park. By now, it recognizes the ritual, demanding it be fed. That'll have to wait a little while longer, though. I know why my plate is full, I say. But what about yours? And why do I have a sneaking suspicion that our business intertwines? Patience slumps down on the bench, pulling his knees higher. He looks like a teenager texting his friends, but instead of a phone, it's that ugly thing in a box that holds his attention. As if to tease the slug, Patience points a finger at the creature's face, a circular mouth of teeth many rows deep, eyeless and without an up or a down. Sharp daggers that are more glass than bone attempt to bite at the walls of the container, but fail to find purchase. Still, Envy looks determined to try, and it's only when Patience brings his finger near the container, poking at where the demon is digging, that it stops. Not only stops, but recoils, as if it were in terror or pain. I don't know yet, Patience says, scratching his bandaged hand on the edge of the bench. But I smell greed, and I smell pride. Things are changing, and I don't know if it's the world balancing itself out or coming off tilt further. I can't help but smile. The absurdity of it all, like the smell of burning bread, is impossible to escape. Even here, within the soft embrace of the park at night, this pushes the boundaries. More deadly sin-themed demons? It takes a moment for Patience to answer, and I fear for a second that my petulance might have upset him. He is something else, after all, not a regular resident of Aquilo, but both something outside and yet ingrained in the very fabric of town. Patience is a sauce, issued from the very essence of the meat, yet apart. He eventually does that strange little half nod that some people seem adept at doing. Not quite a shake, not quite an acknowledgement, but the ambiguous offspring of both. Maybe, he says, I was hoping that you would have noticed if there were any other incidents like the ones that brought about his capture. Again, he taps the plastic container, irritating its inhabitant. Aquilo's been blissfully devoid of unexplained deaths and disappearances, I say, making no effort to hide my relief. But if you're looking for pride, there's another witch in town that you might want to have a talk with. So far, in all of our interactions, Patience has always struck me as a melancholic individual. Calm and true to his name, few things I've said have been able to draw out much of a reaction from him. He's not like Stefan, who's more monotone and detached. Events slide off of Stefan's back as if his personality were covered in oil. Patience has more in common with a sponge. While his surface remains unchanged, he absorbs everything, pulling it in so that it disappears completely. Stefan needed a spreadsheet to remember all the usuals of the Aquilo Cafe customers. Patience, I feel, would know them all just from looking in their eyes. So when he turns to me and smiles, I know I've poked the sponge too deep. His lips don't pull enough to break and show teeth, but I can see the amused accusation in the expression. I know what you're doing, he seems to say, without bothering to put it into words. I'm not the witch police, he says, flipping the container in his hands slowly, making the contents roll and tumble within. I've got problems of my own. Besides, I was once told Dufour clean their own kitchen. Sounds like something I would say to keep people out of my business. Or like something Olivia would tell me Doris used to say, though I think it would have been sweeter from her mouth than mine. Still, I say, reaching into my bag for an apple and a knife, I haven't seen head nor tail of a demon in a while. If you're going to set the table on ominous prophecies, you'll need to give me more ingredients to cook with. Sorry, that's all I've got. Insidious things, pride and greed. I'm not sure they'd leave the same kind of trail as what you've seen so far. Not the most pleasant thought, to imagine that dead bodies are no longer the worst to find in Aquilo. Greed isn't unlike gluttony, or lust for that matter. All it does is want. Like a bottomless hole, no matter how much wealth you pour in, it can never be filled. Pride is more belligerent. It bleeds love from a wound that never heals, always seeking to replenish what it loses. Every blow to the ego, every scratch at the image, is a fresh cut that bleeds some more. But just like him, like envy, or gluttony, or lust, they're creatures of suffering. They're vile, and for that, they must be pitied. At some point during the monologue, Patience stopped talking to me, or even at me. Something about those last sentences sounded like a mantra, of philosophy he was reminding himself. When done, he sinks into a deep silence, studying the slug held captive in his hands. Despite the frequent tortures, I can see something in Patience's eyes, a distant cousin of affection that I can't further define. Mostly, I hear a longing of his own, deep and sad. "You sound like Agnes," I mumble, cutting into the apple. He turns to me, the name meaningless, but no less deserving of his quiet curiosity. But I have no desire to delve deeper. I have my own wounds to prevent from bleeding. "You're like them." I look up from the apple, hoping to read an answer where he probably won't voice one. "Aren't you?" Curiosity unsatisfied, and the question having less impact than anticipated, Patience turns his attention once more to envy. He leans back even further on the bench, lying halfway down on the cold wood. "No," he says, inhaling deeply. "Not like them. Quite the opposite." Sleep came easy and went about its business without dreams. Unlike most nights, when I'm visited by the apparitions of various demons and ghosts, or knitted homunculi these days, Morpheus's embrace was thornless. In short, I slept like a baby. This little miracle was made all the more unusual in that I have quite a lot on my mind. Enough that I would have normally been counting the cracks on the ceiling till dawn. Maybe I've reached some threshold, a breaking point where my burdens become too numerous to count and so become nothing. Or perhaps I'm subconsciously aware that all of my troubles pale in comparison to the crisis I've faced before. Oh no, a wealthy, successful chef has offered me the culinary pilgrimage of a lifetime. How terrible for me. What about this powerful recipe I'm on the verge of unlocking? Does the potential outweigh the cinder block at the back of my mind as I try to unravel it? Upon waking, I almost feel guilty for getting such quality rest when I've yet to know how Gulliver is doing after the incident at the cafe. A short shower is about as long as I have to invest in those thoughts, however. If all went according to plan, Bertrand received the replacement camera and shooting should start anew as the Aquilo opens its doors. So much to do, so much to prepare, yet I spend an unusual amount of time looking at myself in the mirror. There's been very little effort put into makeup and wardrobe when it comes to Chef Gagnon's show. Everything is raw and in the moment. While I've never been self-conscious about such things, there is a sudden imperative to do something more today. Seeing myself in the mirror, about to slap on some deodorant and braid my hair into its everyday plait, I can imagine Gagnon standing behind me. Dressed in pressed clothes of immaculate black, his hair perfectly combed and his face freshly shaved. Even his posture is one that conveys class and demands respect. When able to look beyond the irritability, it's easy to find vast reserves of confidence that the cameras must adore. 2 episodes of mundane little Miriam next to that. The Aquilo Cafe opens almost an hour late this morning, but I hope the results are worth it. My hair is freshly washed, dried, and curled. I dug out some fresh slacks and a blouse to replace my typical jeans and t-shirt. The makeup is a little less of an achievement, but what little I do have on should let the camera know that I'm more than a walking corpse. If Vicky was still in town, she might have been able to perform a more convincing Cinderella act on me, but this will have to do. No one comments on the change immediately. Ian certainly has nothing to say on the subject, though I notice a raising of his eyebrow that denotes curiosity. Does he recognize my effort or simply wonder what's different? Pat is a little more generous in his remarks, giving me a quiet nod of approval. Of course, it's Annabelle who's first to say anything out loud. "Succubus again?" she asks, grinning like a shark. "Louder," I instruct. "I don't think everyone heard you." Like a proper teenager, she rolls her eyes while dropping her bag on the counter. "Please," she complains, peeling her coat off. "No one knows what I'm talking about. And if they do, they're not learning anything new. You, though, are avoiding the question." Helen Edna once told me that most citizens of Aquilo have seen or experienced at least one unnatural thing during their stay here. How they might have rationalized it to themselves doesn't really matter. Everyone has their own way of coping with the impossible. Still, my friend the notary public also explained that most people are content ignoring the weird and wonderful of Aquilo, either too scared to dig deeper or too afraid that even if they do, they may never experience another miracle. "No succubus, no Vicky Paramore," I explain while pouring coffee. "I'm just sick of looking like garbage in front of the cameras." "Please," Annabelle protests, annoyed as if it were her I'd slighted. "You do not look like garbage. Or if you do, it's hot garbage." Her grin telegraphs the punchline, and I reward her with a smile and a fresh mug of coffee. "Thanks, I guess. But I'm not looking for hot. I just want to be presentable. This is going to be seen by, how many again? 2.7 million people? And it'll be online forever. Can you blame me for wanting to look a little professional?" Annabelle is quick to sip from her coffee, indulging in a shiver of enjoyment. She then starts digging through her bag, pulling out a notepad and a rainbow assortment of pens. "You've never not looked professional," she explains. "As long as you've got that apron and you're standing behind that counter, you're the one in charge." I know what she's trying to do. It's what friends do, isn't it? Reassuring each other that whatever crisis of self-image we're going through means nothing, that we're all good enough just as we are and all that. Normally, that's all well and good, but not today. Not for me. "Can't you just let me have this?" I snap, perhaps a little too hard. "I'm sorry. I'm on edge. What do you want to eat?" Annabelle doesn't look too taken aback by the attitude, but her eyes are riveted on me, and her hands are slow to flip through her notepad. I don't think I've offended, but there is a mocking wariness to her now. "Free pastry? So I know you're really sorry?" She winks. "Sure. It's not like you pay me anyway." Mock offense on her face, fingers on her chest in false outrage, she's about to voice her order when we are rudely interrupted. "I see now why you need help to afford further studies into the culinary arts." Gagnon's voice booms over every other sound in the cafe. "Giving away merchandise for all manner of ridiculous reasons is no way to run a business." He's early, and I didn't even hear him walk in. Our shared meal from last night has dulled my senses to his dark presence. A brief show of humanity, and I've let my guard down, forgetting who Chef Gagnon is to me. The baking dish from his roast beef is still drying in the dishwasher, and he's already back to being the man that kicked me from school. Even the offer of supporting my travels as I perfect my cooking seems hollow now, a means to unearth my attachment to Aquilo above my love of the kitchen. If I was running a proper business, I'd be renting the space for filming, not giving it away. Annabelle stifles a laugh, but allows herself to fire a finger gun at Gagnon. The chef either doesn't notice or care. "You're mistaking the nature of the arrangement, Miss Dufour," he explains. "I'm offering you a chance to break out of the constraints you've put on yourself and blossom into your full potential as a cook and a chef. In exchange, I get content for my channel and perhaps someone worth investing into. Don't presume that you're offering me charity here, or that I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart. We are conducting business." His message sternly delivered, Gagnon proceeds to pull off his leather gloves and look over the display. He frowns in consideration, offering no word on the impeccable look of the pastries, cookies, and strudels I have on offer. Not even the fine piping on my royal icing manages to pull a compliment from him. "Coffee and a croissant," he says. "Let's see how well your lamination holds up." He's had my croissants before, during his day of sampling. He should know by now that of all the viennoiserie, croissants are what I excel at most. Between my already masterful ability with baking and the extensive experience I've gained to fulfill the never-ending needs of the Pilvist cult, I doubt Gagnon himself could compete with my croissants. "That'll be $7.73, I instruct, punching buttons on the register. I get a wry smile for the attempt at wit. Ever since his initial sampler's feast, Gagnon has been eating for free, enjoying my generosity under the assumption that it was part of the price of being on his show. He's a frugal eater, one of those quality over quantity types, but a few days of free coffee and pastries adds up. "Clever," he says, tapping his card on the machine. "But you're proving my point. Besides, I'll be deducting this from whatever revenue share was going to go your way. I'll be needing a receipt, by the way." Really? I'm astounded by the pettiness of the man, but also surprised that he was considering sharing any profits from the video. "I didn't know I was getting paid," I say, ripping a ribbon of printed paper from the machine. It's hard to tell what I expected. I wanted more details about this seemingly lucrative venture I agreed to be a part of. I hoped that maybe this new line of conversation would blunt the edge of the topic. What I get is a completely different beast. Gagnon seems offended, but not that I would assume he wouldn't pay me. "I should have remained silent then," he says, snatching the paper from my hand. Annabelle and I watch the curmudgeon walk off to find a table. Coffee in hand and a thick leather bag hanging from his shoulder, he still lacks the croissant he ordered. Impatience rises from him, almost visible like the ripples of heat above a barbecue in summer. Because of the leftover equipment monopolizing the Aquilo's dining room, there's barely any place left to sit. This is the morning rush, and many of my patrons enjoy a few minutes to sit and eat or drink before going off to their daily business. I can see the table where we shared a meal last night and wondered where the calm and contemplative Frederic Gagnon who waxed about Boulogne-sur-Mer went after the evening was over. The table is occupied by a middle-aged couple. The man I recognize as one of the nurses from our small hospital. His partner works at the local market as a cashier. They were served toast, jelly, and scones, along with coffee, not 10 minutes ago. All of it devoured by now. The couple is simply enjoying their time together until work pulls them apart for the day. Few things could be more normal and easy to understand. Except for Gagnon. Whatever got into him rages at a low boil, but it's hard to miss nonetheless. His hand is shaking so hard and his body swiveling around to find a place that I fear he'll spill his coffee. Shrugging at the chef's misery, I go about serving his croissant, putting added emphasis on my selection to make sure there's little to no chance of harsh criticism. "Make sure it's a good one," Annabelle instructs. "He doesn't look like he can take any more sand in his underwear." The virtue of a good batch of pastries is when they can all look identical. And the issue with croissants is that you can't poke and prod them to evaluate their individual quality. They exist in a quantum state where cracking their buttery shell to check the inside will ruin the outside. My obsessive decision-making is cut short when I hear the chimes of the Aquilo door. Without looking, without thinking, I know that whoever is coming through the threshold is bringing with them an entire beach worth of irritants for Chef Gagnon. Croissant held carefully between tongs, I rise to my feet and, like a meerkat, look around to drink in the situation. Nisha. Accompanied by her mother, of course, but Nisha is the sand. Like a miniature imitation of Gagnon, she, too, is looking for a table. And while Anais calmly walks to the register to place her order, Her daughter's head is on a swivel, trying to find room for her daily tea party. Except little Nisha isn't like my old teacher. Her impatience is ebullient with childish delight, not misanthropic displeasure. She's also a known entity in town, while Gagnon is an invader. Aquilo isn't hostile to outsiders, but there's a tendency to lock shoulders. The strange favor the strange. Thus, the inevitable was bound to happen. The couple at the table near the window, the very same where Gagnon and I shared a roast last night, got up to offer their table to Nisha. Ahem, Gagnon interrupts as the little girl starts to unpack her friends on the table surface. I believe I was here first, young lady. Polite words do little to couch his bitter impatience. There's restraint there, but the chains are weak and barely hold back Gagnon's arrogant vitriol. If Nisha had been an adult, he would have torn her apart. But Mr. and Miss Prescott gave me the table, Nisha says, barely looking up from her activities. Be that as it may. Gagnon puts his coffee on the table, as if that were enough to claim it for himself. I have work to do, and no time to argue with children. The way Nisha frowns, she looks like she's ready for a fight. I can't pretend to know or understand what this child has endured so far, but a cranky, middle-aged adult with silver hair must seem tame in comparison. The usually quiet and gentle little girl has her fists balled up and her tiny jaw squared. All of the Aquilo has turned their attention to this odd and uncomfortable man versus child confrontation, but apart from the clicking of tongues in disapproval or the odd averted glance, no one is lifting a finger to do anything. Of course, Anais is quick to come to her daughter's defense, and while I'm morally on her side, I feel like this is the sort of escalation that would reflect poorly on the whole business and can't possibly end well. Excuse me, I mumble, swerving around the counter and then between tables, hoping to arrive in time to defuse the situation. With an adroit twist of my wrist, I maneuver the plate with the croissant above my head, giving it a final spin before landing it on the table opposite Nisha. Hey, the girl protests. This is my table. I know it is, I tell Nisha, pulling out my notepad, but I'm sure you two can share it until another one clears. Is that the service you're offering? Gagnon cuts in, taking his bag off his shoulder, ready to sit. You talked about featuring, what did you call it again? Our mending of bridges? Well, that's the first step, chef. Show me you're a better man than you were at the Institute. Anais, Nisha, and everyone else at the cafe have disappeared from Gagnon's attention. All that's left in his eye is me. Without breaking eye contact, he puts down his bag, leaving only the receipt from our earlier transaction between his fingers. Since I'm getting a lesser experience and you seem hell-bent on hemorrhaging money anyway, I expect you can reverse the charges on this, and that my meal be on the house. With a twist of his fingers, he flips the paper in my direction, urging me to pull it from his grasp. $8. A successful international chef and restaurant owner, star of his own internet cooking review show, and he's ruining my morning over $8. It's hard to imagine that this is the same man with whom I broke bread the previous night. Nisha, I ask, holding the gaze leveled on me. Is it okay if Chef Gagnon shares your table? She grumbles and whines, but eventually lets out a reluctant yes. With that, I snatch the receipt from Gagnon's grasp and let him go about his business. I take Nisha's order, all the while keeping an eye on Anais to make sure it has her approval before walking back to the register. When are you tossing him out again? Annabelle asks as I go around the counter. I'm not, I say. Not before we're done filming his show, which shouldn't be much longer now. As soon as Bertrand and Stefan show up, we can wrap this whole thing up. I ring up Anais's order and grab the food and orange juice that Nisha wanted. I slip in a generous discount to compensate for the unpleasantness of my other patron, but I try to be subtle about it. If I catch that unpleasant man talking like that to my daughter again, Anais says while paying, I understand that you're doing an immense favor by letting us take up a table, especially on a day like this, but I'd rather we go elsewhere than expose Nisha to this sort of person. Chocolate chip cookies are stacked 3 high on the plate once I'm done preparing it, and a fresh mug of coffee and glass of orange juice wait for Anais to take with her. Whatever you think of Gagnon, I say, adding a few napkins to the order, I assure you he's worse. He's got the angry old man energy of someone twice his age, and I know from personal experience that he'll think nothing of ruining someone's life to suit himself. Anais shakes her head at this, frowning at me as if I were the misbehaving child. Then why do you tolerate him? Yeah, Annabelle adds. Why? I can't exactly tell them the truth. How little sense it would make to them if I were to admit that I can't let Gagnon win. Tolerating his arrogance is my path to victory, and patience my best and only weapon. This is a battle for my ego, a fight to take back the pride he stole from me 2 years ago. Gagnon speaks of my journey and how I'm trapped in Aquilo and chained by my own lack of ambition. Little does he know that the shackles that bind me are actually of his making. It's not for very long, I reassure them, trying to be convincing for my own sake. To my relief, little Nisha runs from her table up to the counter to get her cookies. A quick glance shows that Gagnon has built himself fortifications of notepads and electronic devices, neatly bisecting the shared space. Nisha, for her part, has managed to economically use the table surface to have her tea party. Seraphim, Barbot, Julien, and Citron each wait to be served, one of them leaning its back on some of Gagnon's affairs. The girl climbs up on the stool next to Annabelle, kneeling on the seat to reach the countertop better. There's something concealed in her hand that she hides with much effort. Mischief in her eyes, she knocks on the counter to get my attention. I put on my best smile in an effort to further dispel the cloud of frustration under which we all fell because of Chef Gagnon. "Miss Miriam," she demands, "I almost forgot. Remember when I said you should have a friend like mine?" My smile barely falters as my internal composure turns to dust. Everything about me, from posture to expression, becomes little more than facade as I melt from within. Nisha opens her hands to reveal a tiny little raccoon of bright green yarn. It looks soft and a little dopey with big black eyes. Already I can imagine myself throwing it out or burning it in the alley behind the Aquilo. Instead, I take it in my hands, struggling to keep my fingers from trembling. The little girl, radiant with pride and beaming with joy, gives me her best gap-toothed smile. She absent-mindedly scratches at her head before saying, "It's for you." Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Aquilo to donate. Aquilo has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Aquilo for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.